Hey, get in, fellas. We're going to therapy. A subdued tone today as we release this episode on Memorial Day, a day that we honor the ultimate sacrifice and the heroes who lost their lives fighting for our country. And so today we're going to start the episode right off with our interview. We're really lucky to have on the vice president of the Quick Response Force Up app, Mark Messina. That QRFup app is being released today on Memorial Day, and it is a mobile crisis response app. So if you are a first responder or military veteran in crisis, you can use this app to help get support, help ambulance come, help get support in person if you need it. Super cool piece of technology and a really meaningful interview that I have with Mark. We'll start right off the bat. We will then honor the Bromotions Hall of Fame, Rob Riggle. You might think of him as a funny dude from Step Brothers or 21 Jump Street. He also had a very long service in the Navy and makes that a very big part of the charitable work he does today. And then we will wrap the episode by redefining what we might think a hero is. Not meant to take away from military service. And we looked all month at other ways we can define heroes. So we're going to take a big, broad view of how all of us, if we're doing our best, can be considered heroes. For now, let's go. Mark, we'll start as we do on this show by asking you, do you have any vocal exercises to help us warm up today?
Dude, vocal exercises? Man, no.
I know you're a big meditation mindfulness guy. Do we want to do a tranquil breath? Could you lead us in such an act?
Yeah, I'll give it to you. All right. You can start out with a intake of 4 seconds, a hold of 4 seconds, and then an out breathe of 4 seconds. So you're going to go breathing in, hold, and out.
That's good podcasting right there, guys. As I said in the top, we have vice president of the new Quick Response Force app out on Memorial Day, meant to be crisis services, mobile crisis services that become in person for military veterans around the country. Mark is the vice president there, a native of Wisconsin, an upper Midwest boy. But this is just a side project for Mark. It's a ton of work these guys and gals are doing to help get this app up and running. It's going to be a great service across the country. His full-time job is he's the CEO of Original Equipment Manufacturing Tactical Gear. And as we said, his mindful hobbies include meditation mindfulness, as we started with that big, deep breath, and also new term I just learned, wind therapy. Mark likes taking the hogs out on the road and just letting the wind flow through his luxurious hair. Though, Mark, we try to be a good example on the show. Are you wearing a helmet?
Yeah, sure. Sometimes. In the states that it's required. We'll put it that way.
Sure. Really got to let the wind throw through the hair. So, Mark, thank you so much for coming. We're going to get more into the QRF app and dive in a little later in the interview. Can you tell us, you were in the Army, you're a military service. What was your experience like? And what were some things you took away from your time?
So down and dirty, I was in the military for about 15 years. I was medically retired, right at that point. I came in as an infantryman. I spent a good chunk of my career in the 82nd Airborne. After that, I went out and did some platoon sergeant time out in Fort Carson. Quickly after that, I got pulled into SFA, and that's where I finished my career. So not a whole lot of moves throughout my Army career, only about 3, but I did 2 of them in 1 year, so which was pretty exciting for us, I guess.
Worse than out here in Colorado. Where are you now?
Yep. So now I am in Georgia. I actually live out in North Georgia now. I have found out, right, obviously growing up in the Midwest, that I don't do the cold anymore, right? If it's below 50, you're not going to see me. Yeah. So that's a real
one
thing.
Of my friends out here from Tampa, and we were just bitching about humidity as if we had never experienced it or something in our lives. We're going to get more into the military experience as we go here. But Mark, this app is so important because we know that military veterans, when they return from service, really struggle, to re-enter. And so for our audience who hasn't listened, let's really highlight that. So what are some of the things people don't think about, or the less obvious challenges for vets when they return home from service?
I guess there's 2 points of contention there, right? Is returning home from service, right? Because that can be looked at in 2 separate ways, right? It can be returning from a deployment and going back into civilian life, and then it can also be exiting the military service and going back into what I say is the real world, right? And there's kind of an issue with both, right? Because especially when it comes to our National Guard folks, it comes to our reservists, and then obviously still our active duty. But coming out of a deployment and going right back into civilian life, which is what I'll kind of tap on first, it is an absolute culture shock going from one extreme to another. Now, global war on terrorism has pretty much kind of been halted at this point. I know we're still doing some inherent resolve stuff out in Iraq and different things like that. But let me just explain when I came home from my first deployment. I came back, I lived out on a VSO site, which is considered a village stability operation. What they would do is the special forces teams would go out into a local area. They would be out there essentially by themselves with very minimal backup, and they would live within the population. There, they would then go out and talk to local leaders and build up a militia force, or what we considered the Afghan local police forces. We would uniform them, we would equip them with weapons, and we would train them to secure their local areas throughout. We would provide them some other things that they needed, whether they needed fuel for a generator or vehicles or a well, and any things like that that would help rebuild that community and kind of set those things up, right? So that's what I was doing on that first trip. So we didn't have normal things, right? Like we didn't have a shower trailer for the first 3 months, right? Like we didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
I showered in, a HESCO barrier on a pallet with a, water blivet above me, right? We did
Yeah.
that about once a week. We didn't have regular food. We ate off the local economy for the first 4 or 5 months that we were out there. Eventually we ended up getting an Air Force cook out there, but then all I ate was blueberry Pop-Tarts and fried chicken. It was terrible. I don't ever want to see those things again in my life.
Sparingly, yeah, but you're right. I think if I ate the same blueberry Pop Tart every day, I'd also be over it.
And then obviously just living within, the population, right? Like we weren't in, kind of that attack mode type, thing. We were there to build up a larger scale force to help secure an area. And we can go back and forth whether that worked or it didn't work or anything
Yeah.
like that, right? But that was my first deployment. I spent, a little less than a year, out there doing that. And then boom, I'm home and I'm stateside. I spent, 2 hours, back kind of out processing. And then bam, I'm at home with my wife and son.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go to Walmart. Right. I'm going to go, do these little normal things that we take for granted every day being here in the US. Well, I ended up spending 800 and some dollars at Walmart. Right. Because I was stocking up on ridiculous things because I'm like, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need that. And I want y'all to understand that kind of a normal process of reintegration and PTSD. Right.
That's right. You haven't shaken this, that this is a rare opportunity, that you need to take this while you have it, that it might not be there again for another few months. And Mark, this is an unrelated aside. Have you seen how many flavors of Pop Tarts they have these days? It's
Yeah, man.
crazy.
I've seen a ridiculous amount. I have a 14-year-old son who is absolutely in love with Pop Tarts.
He
He
sustains
does
on Pop
prefer
Tarts alone.
Mr. Strudel though, because
Oh,
those are
sure.
definitely an upgrade. And no, I still won't touch either of them. So
That's great. Yeah. That's why. But I hear you, man. I mean, it's really like anybody who's experienced periods of food insecurity, safety security, insecurity for a window, like takes time for the brain and the nervous system, the heart and the soul all to tamp that down and let yourself know that you're safe. So, it sounds like kind of thinking about, we're at Memorial Day. Right. And this really is a time that is meant for us to be thinking about individual military veterans and how their experience has been. I think now, Mark, with everything going on and even the war against terror, which was controversial, the Vietnam of our generation in some ways, we really get confused. I think the military at large and the missions and people get that confused for honoring individual military veterans and as humans. So that's a big part of what I'm hoping to do today. So why Memorial Day in general? What does the holiday mean to you?
Well, obviously Memorial Day is for those who lost their lives overseas, right? And that's really what we are, there to remember, and that's why we get the additional holiday, right? It's not about, barbecuing and doing all that stuff, right? At least on the veteran side. For me, I lost 11 friends to combat. So Memorial Day really it hits home for me because I have 11 of my friends that never did come home. And that's something that's very different, right? And we can go back and forth whether, the war is the right thing to do or it wasn't the right thing to do. I'll be honest with you. I don't agree with the war in Afghanistan or Iraq. But as a member serving in the military, It's not my job to agree or disagree. You're not allowed to have a political view on any of it. You're not allowed to voice a political view on any of it. That's why, a lot of these folks who did are no longer serving in the military. It's your
Mm.
job to go out there and defend the country.
Yeah.
Now we can go back and forth on, oh, well, was it really defending the country? And I get it, right?
Nah,
Um,
not quite the scope today.
right.
We're not.
But hindsight's 2020. At a certain point, a group of insurgents attacked America, and we responded with it. Now,
Yeah.
did we overtake that entire thing in the first 6 months of the war? Yeah, probably. And we probably could have shaped it differently. And we sure as hell could have left there differently. And we can get into that if you want, because I don't know if y'all
Yeah,
want my opinion
I'm
on
not.
it.
Trust me, I wouldn't want to. Let me tell you a big thing, Mark, about being a good doctor as I try to be. You got to know when you don't know stuff, and I would be out of my element asking you about this, socio-political impact of what we were up to in the Middle East over there. So I don't want to lie, but I hear what you're saying, and what I'm thinking about is that it must just be difficult, somewhat of a mind fuck to be serving and not even able to talk about, maybe we don't my values don't align with what we're doing, right? So it really would be a tough thing to cope with, that you can't even express your discontent, right? And that we could all imagine would be difficult.
And this goes back to military training, though, as well. So, and anybody that doesn't think that military institutionalized training isn't a mild form of brainwashing, you are wildly outside of
It
your
has to
spectrum.
be.
And
Yeah.
it has to be, right? And we can even take it back to the simple change that they did in the 50s. Originally, back in the 50s, you were shooting at circular targets, and that's what you were shooting at. Now, anybody in the military, all you shoot at is silhouette target, right? And, Ivans that have a three-dimensional look to it. When they come up, they pop up and then they fall down, right? That is all part of that process to get people to actually shoot at another human being. And I hate to break it to everybody, shooting at somebody is very easy. Everybody's like, oh, I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if I could do those certain things. But when you're trained and it takes away from that, that's the argument with video games nowadays, is that it's desensitizing you to certain elements like that. And that actually came out as a case study that they put out in the 50s for the US military.
Yeah, I think also, and this is a big part of PTSD, as we'll get into, you assume that that person that you're shooting at is going to shoot at you. So that really rewires you, like you said, the brainwashing, especially when you return from service, to be thinking everybody around you is a threat, because you're taught for those deployments that everyone around you is or could certainly be a threat.
Well, and I think a lot of the hypervigilance that comes from, especially like the global war on terrorism, you know what I mean? Like the issue when you fight an insurgency is that you're not fighting a parry element, right? You're not fighting a uniform element that, hey, this is them, this is us, right? We know who the enemy is, we know where they're coming from. You don't. You right there could be my enemy.
Yeah. This is not
Just so you
quite World War One trench warfare where we wore green, they wore blue, and you shot cannons across the field. So
you know,
that
it's
that
it's a polar opposite.
yeah.
So you're fighting the local population, and they can, go 1 second from being your friend to walking over to the other side of the room, picking up a weapon and shooting at you. And that goes a lot into what we call green on blues, blue on blues, green on browns, anything like that, because those are considered like insider attacks,
Mm.
to which are some of the most deadly for US or coalition forces, because it's somebody in your camp. It's somebody that you worked with every day. I've dealt with several of them that people have lost their lives for. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and that's real. So
Yeah.
about half of the guys that I worked with that lost their lives overseas were from insider attacks,
Mm.
meaning somebody
Yeah.
that we came up to trust because we were working together, and they turned their guns in and they killed them.
Man, it really explains, again, like you said, that hypervigilance and that paranoia. They're different, same words, or different words, same spectrum of feelings. And that explains it, right? If you have to be on the lookout for that level of depth, it's really hard to turn it off. It's hard to turn off the thinking, this and the anxiety that comes with it, for sure. Speaking about that service and the brainwashing, we were talking about things that don't translate well back to civilian life. But do you think that there's some of the strengths and mechanisms that you're taught during service that do help with the transition? Or maybe, again, the opposite too? What are things that really make it hard?
And I'll challenge this, right? So, and let's, I think it helps if we actually put out what real definitions are as well too, so people understand it, right? Like PTSD. I'm not going to give you the book definition, right? But let's kind of break that down so all the listeners can truly understand what it is. Everybody here can have PTSD. There's a major difference between combat PTSD and regular PTSD. If you get into a situation that then enables you or forces you to change how you view things or how you do things daily, you have a form of PTSD. You're driving down the freeway, you get into a car accident. Well, now I'm a little nervous driving on the freeway. That's PTSD, folks. It changes your view of something. I don't have a view of, Islamic culture of being bad. Personally, I don't have a view of the people all being bad. You know what I mean? That hasn't changed me, right? Like I'm not, an Islamophobe or whatever they want to call it. I have some of the best people I know are Islamics.
Yeah.
But I do not trust people. Period.
Yeah, and really the VA, the way they do their PTSD training for anyone interested here, talk about any trauma shifts the way you see yourself, others, or the world around you. And that's generally something we talk about a lot. That's relationships in general. So you're right. It's like individuals are good and people are bad. And that is a really common mark. You talked about kind of PTSD and what it looks like as a whole. Anything that impacts you, that changes your view or how you feel, how you act, you avoid things. I correlate also like childhood developmental trauma. It's a very common stance to be like, people suck. I'm negative about people. I can't trust people. And so that's not just military, right? If you've seen some shit and there's been safety issues, you've been abused, any of that stuff is going to shift how you feel about your sense of safety in the world. And it is a unfun, tough, shitty way to live your life, sadly, right?
And it leads right into a lot of isolation, right? Which is one of the biggest, proponents to suicidal ideation, right? At the end of the day, as human beings, whether you want to look at it in, a biblical sense or you want to look at it to a scientific sense, we are meant to be around other people. At the end of the day, humans are meant to be in a tribe or a group or however we want to do it, right? There's 1,000 books on it, and how we're meant to communicate with other human beings. So when you self-isolate yourself, that allows a lot more of those intrusive thoughts to then start drawing in and doing, more and more, which will help lead you down that rabbit hole of suicidal ideation. Outside of some of the other effects from combat PTSD and like desensitization to death and what is the true value of life. So, and I get into this a lot, right? And it's something I talk and preach about quite a bit, is social norms. So, or societal norms. So what, the modern people here in the United States believe as a societal norm is very, very different in third world countries, right? And I've been to every continent here except for Antarctica. I don't plan on going because we already talked about the cold thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm not going. You
If you
know,
were in northern Wisconsin, it's more or less the same, right?
I mean, it's basically the same, and I don't go above the Mason-Dixon. There's like a 4-month gap. We're about to come up to it. I might go up, but all
Yeah.
right, like I don't cross the Mason-Dixon, and essentially you got about 3-4 months that I'll visit. I just don't do the cold, man. It's not my thing anymore. My bones hurt. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fair time as we think about Memorial Day and touching on veteran suicide. I think the statistic is 17 veterans commit suicide every day. That was the data I last saw. Oh my
let me
God.
jump on that real quick because
Yeah.
I'm gonna break some hearts real fast. That's bullshit.
Mm.
All right. And I'll tell you why. Right. And I'll back up, obviously, my statement. So, yes, the
Sure.
VA is putting out that we have lowered the number from 22 to 17, and we're doing so great. And we're doing all these wonderful things. The VA has spent $15 billion combating suicide over the last 5 years. And I am telling you now, the suicide rate is rising. Right now, we're estimating it to be around 35 to 40 a day. And here's why. And I'll show you how the numbers are so skewed. So the VA gets its data from service-connected veterans to the VA, correct? There are roughly 9 million service-connected veterans to the VA, and that's how they collect their data and what they get it from for suicide rates. But there's 19.6 million veterans in the United States. So we're already off at about 60 some odd percent. So they're not getting data from that, 10.6 million that are not connected with
Not
the VA,
connected.
and plus or minus a few 100,000. With that as well, too, when they classify suicides, right? I do believe this is in the veterans' benefit. However, Suicides are only classified as what are considered to be violent suicides, i.e., they hung themselves. They used a firearm. They cut themselves. They did something along those lines. They took the leap of faith for whatever. That would be considered a violent suicide. To where if it was a drug overdose, it's not considered suicide. If it was a vehicle accident, right, where it's not considered suicide. If it were, oh, there's another really good one too, and I'm brain dumping it. But and that's my point though, is that
Yeah.
these things they're not considered to be suicide. Homelessness. Excuse me, there it is.
Right.
So if you're in a homeless situation and you pass away, it's not considered suicide.
Hmm.
So your numbers are skewed based on that, right? And we see a major uptick of suicides after every major conflict. All right. So the Vietnam era, I want to say they did it. They just stopped recording data in 2019 for it. And that was the last published one. And they said there was only 100,000 suicides after Vietnam. Does that number even remotely make sense?
No, and it's interesting, Mark. You bring all that up because I didn't really even think about the fact that how could it be that military, veteran suicide rates are dropping when suicide rates amongst men, and of course, military, not all men, but suicide rates in general increase in this country, and especially amongst men. Right. It does feel disingenuous to think that service veterans would be immune from what is a major problem in our country.
And this is a big thing that I push and right, and this is data that we've collected through the APA, the CDC, as well as like Stop Soldier Suicide, and then from 988 as well too. 1% of our country, it's actually a little bit less than 1% veterans and first responders within our country. Yet they make up 33% of the national suicide rate. So, and I want everybody to take a second, right, to really think about that. Less than 1% of our nation's population makes up 33% of the suicide rate. Veterans are 70% more likely to commit suicide than the average person.
Damn, I don't think the 33% stat is definitely new to me. And I think it's a really good transition, Mark, to talk about the Quick Response Force app that's coming out here on Memorial Day because we may be hearing it right now. Can you tell the people, like, what is the app about and where did the idea come from? What are you guys hoping for?
And I'll be real, right? I didn't found this organization. I came in about 8 months into it already running, and I'll kind of touch on that, right? I was introduced to it through my company, and I was going to be like, hey, I'm gonna run a fundraiser for you guys. I'm heavily vested to this. I want to get involved because at that point I was looking at joining Mission 22. I started learning a lot more about Mission 22, and noticed I didn't join.
Tell people what Mission 22 is because I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mission 22 is a nonprofit organization that raises money and funds to provide awareness to the 22 a day veterans that commit suicide, right?
Sure.
Everybody knows the 22 a day. It was a marketing campaign from 2012 that came out at the stat at that point, and it's just kind of stuck. And that's kind of where everybody was at and working with. And that was the nonprofit organization that goes out and does those things. So if you like going out and doing hikes and you think that stops suicide and you want to go for a walk with a flag and look patriotic, by all means, follow those NPOs and you're going to do great. If you want to actually make a difference, talk to us. All right. Sorry, NPOs that just raise awareness piss me off because
Yeah.
they're collecting millions of dollars to sell t-shirts and raise awareness instead
Yeah.
of actually solving a problem.
Right. Which is the polar opposite of what you guys are up to at QRF.
We ended up running our pilot. QRFup is an application. We created it. We partnered with MySOS Family, and they are our app developers. So that way we could have a realistic and functioning app over us trying to create it, who
Sure.
are basically Neanderthals when it comes to the tech industry. Look, a duck's a duck. I know where my weak points are, and tech is definitely it for me.
Takes a
So
village, brother. Sure.
absolutely. But we created this application, and how it works is any veteran or first responder is capable of downloading the app and then joining into our system. When they find themselves in a moment of crisis, right? And let's kind of define crisis first, because I think that's incredibly important for people to understand. When you are at a breaking point, when you are at, I don't know what else to do and I'm stuck, I need to call the suicide hotline or I need to do something along those lines. Instead of making that call and sitting on hold and maybe getting your phone call answered, you can use our app and you can push our red hot button. And obviously there's a lot of science behind the red hot button, right? You push it, you can feel it vibrate and move. It starts turning blue, and then it directly connects you with a licensed therapist in your state.
Mm.
We are using all volunteer therapists. We are hiring on them as we go through our full national launch. So we will eventually have around 100 therapists on staff at all times to cover the entire country. But connects you directly with a therapist. We found through our pilot around 60% of calls that we would receive were able to be de-escalated and then, get that service member, veteran, or first responder into a safety plan. And then, it was de-escalated. They're on their safety plan. We then will put you on a timer depending on the metric. Again, not a doctor. Definitely have nothing in social work or psychology outside of like my own, mental health journey.
Sure.
So we have a metric for it. It goes between 2 and 8 hours. And then that person has to call back. They've got to call back in and just verify that they're on their safety plan and that, hey, I've been able to de-escalate. I'm moving forward to this. And then we can involve them in other wraparound services. Now, here's the key, right? And that's 60% of our calls. And that's, that is success at its finest. The other percent, right? We've got another 40% outlying. We have built up an army of peer-to-peer support specialists that we provide training through Columbia University through their Psych Armor program. And that way they can get their 12 hours of peer-to-peer support training. They do get the certification from that program as well. And obviously we need that for our licensure and our insurance because it's through the roof, as y'all can, I'm sure, understand.
Of course.
We then have the option, right? If that therapist is unable to de-escalate that phone call, right, and they need somebody there in person, or they don't call back in that timed window and that therapist is worried that they fell back to crisis, they then can activate a mobile responder. These are all volunteers. All right. And I'll get into how that works as we go.
Yeah, that's
But
impressive.
that therapist will go in and hit that button to where it will send out a text message, a phone call, and an email to every responder within a 100-mile radius of that user's location. We do use geolocating through our application. Let's be transparent about that. We do use that. And I can explain a little more why. And some people don't like that and they don't want to use it because we can look at where your location is.
Right.
But we can only look at your location once you push the button. So just to be transparent.
Which makes sense because that's your saying. I mean, if you push that button, there's a lot of stuff in healthcare, right? If the doctor deems it an emergency, life-threatening emergency, a lot of rules go out the window with consent. So it's a strange thing, Mark, because I've worked on suicide hotlines. I've worked with military veterans at the VA and get taken, calls from their homes, and people will be like, no, I'm not going to tell you where I am. And I'm like, dude, that is the scariest thing you could say on this phone call. So it's pretty scary if somebody says they're in crisis but won't tell you their location. I mean, that could really raise concern. So I think it's pretty prudent on your guys' part that that's a part of the functioning of the app.
And it absolutely is. And I can explain the big reasons why here in a little bit, but we'll get through the rest of how the app works, right? So because there is a little bit more to it. So those mobile responders then will get that alert and it'll come across your phone and pop up on there. And then as soon as we get one person saying, hey, yes, I will respond. If you can't respond, you're in the middle of something, you're a volunteer, right? We understand that. You know what I mean? Like we get it. I'm in the middle of bathing my child. I can't just pick up and leave. Nobody else is here. You know what I mean? Like It's one of those things. But the goal of that is to have enough responders through those states. And that is how we are doing our state by state full on launch, is to meet those median numbers of 109 responders per state is the minimum. Like that's our minimum manning to consider the state to be live. The target goal is around 500 responders, per state, as we develop and continue launching everything national. But that provides us enough responders with, people coming on, people falling off and such forth to get somebody to you. So once that responder says, yes, hey, I can show up and I'll go up and meet them, it provides them the location, that person's name, and it connects them to that call between the therapist as well as the person that's in crisis. So they actually physically do a handoff between them. The therapist is going to stay on the line with that individual until that responder shows up. And that's crucial, strictly because we don't want them just getting hung up, right?
You talk about isolation already. That time in between would be, very important time.
Again, right, pilot data, we pulled out. So we ran our pilot in Minnesota for two reasons. One, because Ram, our founder, he's from there, and we were actually able to do a pilot where he had enough resources to run it. Running a pilot is extremely difficult especially when you're completely self-funded and have very minimal support. That was one of the main reasons. But the other reason to that is Minnesota is a very rural state for the most part. Obviously, you have a couple main cities, but outside of that, it's more rural. And we really wanted to test that response time in that more of a rural area. And that is actually how we got to the 100-mile radius. We didn't know at this point, and we needed to figure out, hey, how long is it going to take for us to physically show up? What's the realistic radius that we need to create? What's all those different, data pieces? So with that, we got our 100-mile radius. Average response time is around 41 minutes from when the call goes out to a responder physically showing up. Out of the 2,515 calls that we got throughout our pilot program, ran out of the state of Minnesota, we had 340 some odd calls that we physically had to send responders out to, which and we were able to get a good test of it and the system. Responder shows up, they do that one-to-one handoff, and obviously there's a couple variations that come with that, right? And I want people to understand too, because I always get the question, well, what if they have a firearm? What if they have all these other things?
Yeah.
Right? There's a safety concern there. And 100% there is.
That's something, the volunteers are aware of. I'm sure a lot of vets themselves and, people who'd be aware of what they're stepping into.
Right. And there is that there. But let me break down that stigma. When a person is in crisis and wants to kill themselves, they don't want to harm you. They want to harm themselves. And you physically showing up for somebody who's in those moments where they are looking at it of everybody in my life will be better off without me here, and I'm ready to remove myself from the equation, but I'm doing this one last ditch attempt to see if it's viable for me to stay. You physically showing up will immediately de-escalate that. And that's the real power behind what we're doing, because it's another brother or sister showing up for you. It's generally somebody that has been through that. It's somebody who's got years overseas, just like me, right?
Yeah.
I've responded to several calls here in Georgia, and I showed up and I walked up, and you can tell I'm a veteran, guys. Like, I hate to break to everybody, I'm covered in
Yeah.
tattoos. You know what I mean? I got the dumb beard and the haircut and all of it. Like, I'm a stereotype. Welcome to the club. Showing up and them physically seeing you there is like, okay, I can breathe for a second.
And you made such a, we talked about earlier, the change between being in service and being back home, that isolation that comes, it's such a change. You have people around all the time. You are a sense of community, as often strange as serving and you joke about brainwashing can be. You are around people, you're in a community, and then maybe you're not anymore, depending on what your family life is like, or depending on how you respond to being home. Obviously that camaraderie and just that human nature of the app and the way it functions is so important. You touched on another thing that I was really impressed by when I was meeting with you guys originally, which is the services, the connection to services after the fact. How, who is offering, how, because in general in America, it's hard to access and connect to mental health resources. So what happens next?
So yeah, we looked at it as this, right? We know exactly what we are. We are that immediate help in the moment, right? I can get you online with a therapist and I can get somebody out to your location. It's expensive to do this, y'all. All right.
Yeah.
I've built out the 5-year pro forma for it throughout our entire launch. When we are fully launched nationally, it's going to cost around $31 million a year to run this program. But let me tweak that a little bit, because that's the same thing we pay a football player, right? That's the same thing that we do those different things.
Not
Now,
half as much as Patrick Mahomes, but sure. Yeah.
right. And you get what I'm saying. So I know when you asked earlier, like, oh, what are your sports? What are your this? And it's like, dude,
Yeah.
I don't really follow it.
Yeah.
And there's kind of my why, right? Because to me, there are so many other bigger things out there that need support and need energy to, other than watching sports, man. And I get it, right? It's probably because I, spent the last 15 years in the military. And let's be
Mhm.
real, even when I was stateside, I wasn't home,
Yeah.
right? So I wasn't around. And just trying to follow and keep up with it is virtually impossible. So I just kind of left it behind. But now when I look at it all, it's like, man, like, I can do a lot better things with my time.
And hear that, gents, right? For many of our audience who are diehard sports fans, I being one of them, it's not life and death. Let us remember that. But kind of back to that point about the connection to services, like 31 million. is obviously real money. I don't think we need to go off on this tangent, but I do wonder what it costs at the VA to run their suicide hotline and services like that I was once a part of. You may know that number.
I do. Obviously, the VA hotline and 988 are very close in partnership when it comes to that. In 2023, they were granted $700 million to operate and run 988 call centers and to continue branching that out. I know with Doge coming out, I'm sure there are some changes and some flux to a lot of those different things and how they're running that program. I don't work for 988, right? I'm very close with one of the founders of 988, Kristen, and she is a wonderful human being and a wonderful mentor, and I greatly appreciate everything she does. But at the end of the day, 988's getting, 350 to 400 and some odd thousand calls a month. They're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're not able to answer them. They're dropping calls because there's too many calls coming in. That's an issue. You know what I'm saying? So, and that's really a kind of a niche point that we bring into play because we have niched. We only service veterans and first responders. Now, would we like to open that up, a few years down the road and open it up to more for civilian application and other different things? Absolutely. But
Sure.
we're not focused on that right now. We're
No.
focused, for our community and solving that problem. Again, 1%, 33%.
Which is quite a footprint to be able to cover, and shows, of course, the importance and the value of what you guys are doing. I'm thinking, just a few empathy building moments here on Memorial Day, and a few questions to help us push towards the end here. So, I really think if I had not worked at the VA during my residency, Mark, as a psychiatrist training there, I would have really minimal idea of what it's like to serve and what the experiences are like. And I don't think that's because people don't care. I think it's just we're all stuck in our world living our life. So I do, since that time, think it's very crucial. This is a huge, important part of our country and how the world works. From your perspective, what are some of the most important things that you wish civilians like me and like the majority of our audience understood about service and the transition back home?
PTSD and combat PTSD are not a disabling factor. And here's what I'll kind of explain is that yes, did I serve in combat? Yes, I did on multiple occasions. I have several years overseas. Spent a very large portion of my life over there. And yes, I've been in plenty of gunfights. I've done everything that you can think of doing, and that's great, right? But at the end of the day, nobody gives a shit. It's just the truth. But I'll tell you this is that that's not what haunts me. It's not what I did overseas. I want y'all to understand too that majority of the people that are over there and working and doing that, that's not the biggest guilt factor that we have. It's the way that we think now. And because of that and what we experienced and what we did, that I view things very differently here in the United States. Case in point, sports. Case in point, driving. I take a different way to go different places and do different things. So when you're dealing and talking with veterans and everybody loves to be like, "Oh, thank you for your service." I want y'all to understand what you're actually thanking them for because I don't think most people understand. They just view it as a kind of a check the box, hey, thank you for your service. You did something for our country and, that's great. But nobody understands the time that it took to be there, right?
Yeah.
The view of different things. Throughout my military career, I was home for 3 Christmases, right over 15 years. I want y'all to remember that. I made 2 of my son's birthdays. I was not there for his birth. I was not there for anniversaries. I was not there for all of those different things because I was out doing my job. My first deployment, I called home 5 times throughout that entire time that I was there because that's when I had access to a phone line to actually call back home. My son was born. I deployed about 4 months later, right? So he was 4 months old when I left for my first deployment. I didn't come home until he was walking and talking and doing all that. I didn't have photos of him. I didn't have FaceTime with him. I didn't have any of that. So that's what we're thanking our guys for because they're not serving to support you. I hate to break it to everybody. They're not. They're doing it because that's their job. They felt a calling to it, or they didn't really have any other options, and
Yeah.
they joined the military to get some life experience. And
Access
that's
to
just the truth.
college funding, access to better loans, money. It's a stable employment for a lot of people coming out of rougher areas. So, Mark, if not the thank you for your service, are there other ways that you want civilians to either approach conversations or offer acknowledgement of the sacrifices made?
And here's why I bring it up, right? And this is something that is very controversial over the veteran community and civilians, right? Because so many veterans, they take it with a grain of salt. My point of that is, and I think a lot of people genuinely do want to thank them for their service because they hadn't been there and they don't understand. But I want people to understand what they're actually thanking them for. Getting out there and doing that. And I had a kind of an epiphany moment when I was thanked for my service by an individual who was actually held overseas and his family was oppressed. He lived his entire life that way and he finally ended up getting a visa and being able to come over to the United States. He thanked me for his service. I'm like, oh, thanks for your support, man. And just kind of kept going. He's like, no, like, wait, seriously, thank you. He told me the story of everything that he had been through and a lot of those different things. And he's like, thank you for what you did. He's like, I know you weren't there because you weren't old enough. You know what I mean? He was an older gentleman. But he's like, what you guys do actually matters and actually changes lives for so many people. It affects more than you know. And that was kind of my epiphany moment of like, okay, what we do matters because so many guys leave the military, myself included, to where I felt my service was cut short. I felt I lost my career. And in all reality, I did. I lost my career because I raised my hand and asked for help
Mm.
because I was in those depressive moments. I was having panic attacks. I was having all those issues that come with that from bottling everything up for so long and not dealing with my problems. I felt like everything I did throughout my career was a waste of time.
Because of the medical discharge and just it not being, it's an
Well,
unceremonious
how
ending.
how we left Afghanistan, right? And
Right.
how we did all those certain things. You know what I mean? Like, was it the right thing to leave Afghanistan? Yeah, we should have left Afghanistan a long time before that. 100%. But it's how we did it.
In the weeks leading up to this, Mark, we covered National Police Officer Week before this, and same thing. It's like, people basically are told not to speak up if they're having problems because they probably will lose their job. And it's really difficult. It's terrifying. I mean, military and police, we got two types of people with guns, boys. We want to know if they're in a situation where it's going to go poorly for them or everyone else around them. So, yeah, Mark, it's tough to have had what we want people to do, which is to get support if they need it, having been what ended your career. We would hope that can change in the future.
Well, and so that's a caveat as well too that we do with our application, just so everybody's tracking as well. I kind of forgot about that part. Again, right? Sua sponte conversation. So we actually have a toggle in our app that will directly connect you with 911 support, whether it's medical personnel or, police showing up. We have that option built into our application to where you can have 911 support requested right away to be sent to you or not. A big portion of that is for people like myself. Because if I go up and I say, hey guys, I'm having this problem, and that deems me not to be able to do my job anymore. Right. I can't go do my job anymore and be trusted to get certain things like that done because of the mental situation I'm in. We all understand those different things and have figured that out. But we offer that solution to where we'll actually get people to ask for help versus doing exactly what I did for the longest time and not.
It's a shame, Mark, because I know what you're referring to is if police show up, then you could get put on. In Colorado, it's called a mental health hold or an M1. In different states, it's called different things. So I had that conversation with veterans and with young people who said, I've now been in the hospital. I don't know if I can go to the military. And it's tough, man. I'm just trying to relate because I've been in the opposite end of that as the person who has to sign off on your hold and us to say I need you to stay, whether this impacts your future or not. It's really difficult stuff, Mark. And seeing it from your lens and the opposite side of my interactions with veterans and people who wanted to become veterans and knew that could impact them. So it's fucked, man. That's really probably the best way. I
It,
think
it's a
it's
double
just
sided
it is
coin.
complicated, right? Saving people from themselves, keeping people safe. We take autonomy away when we're keeping people safe. It is really, really complex. And I think, again, what you guys are doing is so nice. It's volunteers, it's fast, it's personal, it's peer-to-peer support, all types of things that really, if you and I, Mark, were drawing up the roadmap to how to make this world, as we say on the show, a kinder, gentler place, this would be a lot of that. It would feel a lot like this, which is, hey, you need somebody to talk to. You need it to be somebody you can relate to. And again, our big point on this show is helping men be more likely to be peer support for one another. And Mark, thank you so much today, for coming and being another example of a male who asked for help and has now made it a point in his life. Mark is a father. He has a full-time job, spends 30 to 60 hours a week helping develop and this app and make it as great as it's going to be. Mark, just as we observe Memorial Day and the celebration of the QRFup app, final thoughts.
Look into it, guys. Do your research, right? Everybody loves supporting and doing certain things, whether it's as a responder or through donations or anything along those lines. But before you jump headfirst into an organization just because they're the big name and have the biggest social campaigns, do your research and what they actually do. There are a ton of veteran nonprofits out there, hundreds, if not thousands, that just don't do shit. They don't solve any problems. They go on a couple hikes or they do a couple little odd and end things here and there, but they're money makers. Y'all support nonprofits that are actually making an impact and making change, whether it's ours or another one. But please, for the love of God, do your research and figure out what they're actually doing with the money. Make sure that they have transparency about it. Use Candid. All right, you guys can go on Candid and actually see what their programs are, what their money is going to, how much they've raised for it, all those different things before jumping headfirst into an organization.
That's awesome, Mark. Sounds very, very impassioned for you and personal, given the hard work you guys are doing. We'll leave, with Mark's point, and maybe in lieu of, thank you for your service, but really to identify with any veterans, guys, when you come across them and get the chance to get to know them, their story, and recognize, the sacrifice, the changes it makes, to have served and sacrificed time with your family, sense of safety, all those things that are super, super important. So, Mark, thank you for your time, brother. I hope you're able to really celebrate this Memorial Day and all the hard work you guys have done to acknowledge your own sacrifices and, of course, the loss of lives of your friends, man.
No, I greatly appreciate it. And I appreciate you, taking the time and getting us on the show just to highlight the work that we are doing and, what we actually need to be here to support.
It's good shit, man. The more of it, the better, baby. We're all in this together. Hey, and if nothing changes, nothing changes. Let's get after it, man. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, boss.
All right, fellas, it's that time again. Time to honor another incredible man who truly embodies the kinder, gentler bro spirit, someone whose impact extends far beyond what we might expect. This week, for our Heroes Appreciation Month finale, we're inducting a man who has served our nation with distinction, made us laugh until our sides hurt, and consistently uses his platform to give back. Let's welcome to the Bromotions Hall of Fame the one and only Rob Riggle Jr. Born on April 21st, 1970 in Louisville, Kentucky, but raised in Overland Park, Kansas, Rob Riggle might be best known for his comedic timing and those instantly recognizable roles in movies and TV. But before he was making us laugh, he was serving. And I mean really serving. Rob Riggle is a retired United States Marine Corps Reserve officer. He actually joined the Marines in 1990 and would go on to serve for an incredible 23 years, retiring in 2013 as a lieutenant colonel. During his time, he was deployed to spots like Afghanistan and Liberia, even serving in the infamous Iron Triangle region. His military career is no joke, and it's a testament to his dedication and discipline and the kind of person who could go on to make jokes after serving in such serious situations. This is what we think of him as. He's built quite an impressive career that's made him the household name that he is now. His successful stand-up comedy career led to him becoming a cast member on Saturday Night Live from 2004 to 2005, and that spun him into his correspondent role, where he became really famous as a correspondent on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart from 06 to 08. On the big screen, for some of our younger people, you probably remember him for being in The Hangover, Step Brothers, The Other Guys, 21 and 22 Jump Street. He's made cameos on massive shows like Modern Family and The Office. Currently, he's keeping us entertained as the hilarious host of ABC's Holy Moly. But it's about what Rob continues to do for the world and continues to do for the community that makes him a true BHoF candidate. His profound commitment to philanthropy and giving back. He's not just good, he's famously good at this. He's the co-founder of the Big Slick Celebrity Weekend in Kansas City, an annual event that has raised millions of dollars for pediatric cancer research at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City. He also uses his platform to support veterans organizations like Semper Fi Fund and the USO, where he frequently goes to entertain troops overseas. A living example of someone who never forgets where he came from and constantly gives back to the communities that have helped shape him. To give you a small glimpse of Rob's heart and his infectious energy in action, let's take a quick look at a highlight reel from the Big Slick Celebrity Weekend, and you'll see a lot of familiar faces. This event is co-led by Rob, Jason Sudeikis, Paul Rudd, Eric Street, and Jason Keshner. So really cool thing. We'll share the screen, come right back.
You know, for us to see how this has grown every year is humbling and exciting. And in addition to raising more money, more people have come on board. I can't even express what the Royals are doing. Truly, they are
stepping up to the plate.
I was going to say it.
Let me say it.
Like so
no, you were being
obvious.
sincere. Let me do it.
When I think about the highlight reel,
Yes.
that's going to kick it off.
Yeah. Stepping up to the plate.
God, they have so much fun there.
The field looks really, really nice right now, but I guarantee you it's going to be a mess. There's going to be blood everywhere.
There are probably a couple guys that are playing that are pretty good, a whole bunch of us who are not, a few people who have never played, and it's nice to get that kind of game in front of, like, you know, tens of thousands of people.
Keep the ball in front of you, protect the moneymaker.
We'll cut there to see James Vanderbeek making a nice joke about his handsome face. So tons of celebrities there, a really good time overall, and an event that's caught a lot of fire in that Midwest region. So guys, you know, Rob Riggle really embodies the ideal kinder, gentler bro, a man of immense courage and dedication, a lovely example of what we'd love masculinity to be in terms of being able to be a veteran, a comedic force, a philanthropist who uses his platform for good. And that multifaceted service, his relentless pursuit of laughter, and his generous spirit. Rob, welcome to the Bromotions Hall of Fame, a truly worthy inductee. Rob, one of the many people we can consider a hero as we look to consider and redefine how we think about heroes after the break. So fellas, let's talk about something incredibly important on this Memorial Day. How do we define a hero? And more importantly, how can we expand our definition of that word to understand what service to others means and sacrifice in order to be in that service of others? When we think of a hero, especially today at Memorial Day, our minds rightfully go to the incredible men and women of our military. Let's be clear, those who stand on those front lines, who put their lives on the line, and especially those who made the ultimate sacrifice in passing in defense of our nation, they are without question heroes in the most profound and sacred sense of the word. It does not matter your political affiliation. It does not matter how you feel about these combats and these conflicts we've been in over decades and decades. These individual people are individual people with families, and we should not confuse them with conflict as a whole or our thoughts on the roles of government and roles of war in general. So we owe a debt to those people that can never really truly be repaid. And at least what we can do today is honor and remember them. That spirit of heroism, though, service and sacrifice, while epitomized by the armed forces, also manifests in so many other critical roles within our community. This is why we wanted to celebrate Heroes Appreciation Month at the podcast, to think about first responders as they are with the QRFup app, the police officers, firefighters, paramedic who run towards danger when everyone else is running away. They don't even think about it. Let's also think about those healthcare workers. We talked to Nurse Sam, who tirelessly care for the sick and vulnerable, often in the most challenging circumstances. Teachers who dedicate their lives to shaping the next generation, and our community leaders who advocate for us, for change, and to uplift those around them. And heroism can look different. You don't just have to be in one of those jobs that we think about. It can often be quieter. A single parent working 2 jobs to provide for their kids, day in and day out, demonstrating that relentless dedication and certainly sacrifice. It's the friend who shows up consistently for you, who listens without judgment when you're struggling, offering emotional support that feels like a lifeline when we might need it most. It's the individual who bravely steps out of their comfort zone to learn a new skill, take on a difficult challenge, or speak up for what's right, even when it's unpopular. It's the neighbor who checks in on the elderly, the volunteer at the local food bank, or the mentor who guides someone through a tough time. These are all acts of profound courage, selflessness, and dedication when, let's face it, guys, they don't have to be doing that. And so we want to make sure we honor those different types of heroism and the common threads, which is a willingness to put others' needs before their own. The courage to face fear, whether it's physical danger or the fear of being vulnerable, as we talk about a lot here, guys, and this unwavering dedication to a cause greater than oneself and the endurance during immense hardship. And often sacrifice involves extending beyond those most visible acts. There's an emotional toll and the mental health challenges that come with that. The long hours away from loved ones, sacrifice of personal well-being that we know in so many careers, military, first responders, and healthcare being amongst the ones in the top of our minds, suffer consequences of their commitment. We need to talk about the personal sacrifices made by anybody who consistently prioritizes the well-being of others over their immediate comfort or gain. And this is where we really got to give love to the QRFup app and these guys. And I want to make sure we recognize how awesome the work that they're going to be doing is and how often the work they've already done is to get this app ready to go and out for everybody. So on this Memorial Day, let's reflect. Let's make sure that we take time to acknowledge and appreciate the sacrifice of all of our heroes in our country, in your families, or yourself, giving yourself credit for the things you do to help make the world a better place. The best way we can feel good about ourselves and continue to add back to the world. All right, we'll be back right after this to wrap up. All right, y'all, let's wrap with our recommendations on this Memorial Day as we consider the lives of veterans and other heroes in our recommendations this week. So our book, this will not be a secret book to any KGBs or anyone who's ever been in therapy, and that's The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. In short, this is a book that we learn the history of the PTSD diagnosis and where it came from, and that was with guys returning from Vietnam with Dr. van der Kolk and his work with military veterans at the VA. Really good book to understand trauma and how the mind, the body, and the soul change when we respond to trauma. Recommended to everybody on this planet. So popular these days, you can find it in the airport. And as we know, we like to keep the TV show recommendations light, so no shock with the military theme. We're going with MASH. If you never knew what this acronym stood for, it was Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. So the military's version of Scrubs. It was really the beginning of the dramedy, funny but serious TV show that Scrubs went on to emulate and things that we love at this show. It ran from 1972 to 1983 and set in the backdrop of the Korean War. MASH is a great show. Again, kind of thinking about that tone. If for our younger audience who've never watched, it still very much holds up. And there was a reason that its finale that aired in 1983 drew over 100 million viewers, making it the most watched television episode in U.S. history at the time. And it carried that mark for a very long time. For the movie, switch it back to serious, a Steven Spielberg classic, Saving Private Ryan. It's a great movie, intense, about the brotherhood, about the relationships, about the violence, about the seriousness we see in combat. So we're going to get together June 4th next week for the 1-year anniversary of this show. It will be our 52nd episode. And with mixed emotions, I will say that it is going to be our last episode of this iteration of the podcast. We're taking a long break to figure out how to continue to do this for everybody in a way that is meaningful and impactful. And we'll talk more about that next week. Me, Mike, Richie, Christine, we're going to ask a lot of our friends, family, and other KGBs to participate in the final show where we look back on this year, what we've accomplished, what we've learned, what we've laughed about, and what we've cried about. And I want to give everybody a heads up because I hope to hear from you guys about the things that you enjoyed, the things that you've learned, the things that you're taking forward. And I know that it's been quite an honor to put this podcast together and to hopefully make a big impact out in the world for our audience. We'll see everybody next week. I hope this episode could be meaningful. And let's wrap by saying take time to reflect and honor those military veterans and anyone in your lives who may have lost their life in the service of others or struggled in the service of others. We'll check y'all next week.